So once again, good afternoon everyone. So for today, we will be your reporter and we will going to present the impacts of tourism and hospitality. Learning outcomes. So at the end of this chapter, you should be able to first determine the economic effects of tourist and hospitality. Second, discuss the social impacts of tourism and hospitality. Third, explain the impacts of tourism and hospitality on culture. And fourth, analyze the environmental impacts of tourism and hospitality.
The impact of tourism and hospitality. The rapid growth of tourism and hospitality in the 20th century has produced both problems and benefit for destination countries. It has had a visible impact on the socio-cultural and socio-economic environment. Although tourism and hospitality can bring economic advantage to the destination country, it also brings with it a serious long-term problems which, without careful control and planning, can threaten the society. Tourism and hospitality can create big impact to the socio-cultural and socio-economic environment. In socio-cultural, it can engage the tourists to different cultures, relationship, behavior, beliefs of the people that live in that destination. In socio-economic, it can give more income to the people that live, and also it can give op- employment opportunity to the people. To the economic advantage, it can bring more income not just for the society but also to the country. But tourism and hospitality has also a bad effect if we cannot control it. It can be threatened to the society. The positive economic effects of tourism and hospitality. Like any other industry, tourism and hospitality affects the economic of those areas in which it take place. The area affected may be a resort, a region, or an entire nation. N- Notwithstanding the size of the affected area, the economic effect of tourism and hospitality may be classified into four groups, namely the effect of on income, on employment, on the area's balance of payment with the outside world, and on the investment and development. Income. The tourism and hospitality industry obviously generates income within a destination country. Nations wanting to increase their income have used tourism and hospitality as a means for reasonable, quick development. Experience has shown us that it takes less time to increase income from tourism and hospitality than from manufactured goods or other available options. Tourism and hospitality are both income generator and redistributor because they pay taxes and they earn money from different businesses activities. Also, tourism and hospitality are a labor-intensive industry that are needed a large employees to create a service or goods like hotels, restaurants, resorts, and others to generate income to a salaries, wages, profit, interest, and rent. We all know that tourism has a big effect in different countries. Also in East Africa and Pacific that are the developing countries than the developed countries. Income will be a greater in different areas of every countries which generate large number of tourists where visitors tend to stay from longest period where the destination attacks an upmarket or more free spending mental and where are many opportunity to spend. The importance of tourism and hospitality to the country's economy can be measured through a national income created by the tourism and hospitality. The common method to estimate income generated by a tourism and hospitality can be determined by a multiplier for the destination. Multipliers are means of estimating how much extra income is produced in economy as a result of the essential spending or infection of cash. We all know that tourism and hospitality is one of the source of income of the Philippines. From PSA or Philippine Statistic Authority, tourism contribution to the country's GDP's grow from 12.3% in 2018 and 12.7% in 2019.
Employment from local to national benefits as well from tourism and hospitality. In general, the tourist industry offer more employment opportunities than other economic sector. Generating employments is perhaps the greatest advantage of the tourism and hospitality on developing economy. Tourism and hospitality is a labor-intensive industry so that it needs more employees to generate goods and service to the tourist and to the consumer or the customer. Hos- Tourism and hospitality generates employees faster from developing nation and has a great salary than the developed nation that usually they are paid less. There are three types of employments generated by the tourism and hospitality. First, the direct employments. Second, the indirect employments. Third, the induced employments. Direct employments is generated as a result of providing goods and service directly to the tourists in the hotels, restaurants, bar, nightclubs, and the like. Indirect employments, it's involved the travel agency, taxi driver, receptionist, and manager of the hotels that are directly deal with the visitor or tourist. Indirect employments consist of those positions that are consisted with other tourism-related activities but are used by the both the local residents and the tourists. Indirect employments are the jobs that are created to supplies and support travel and tourist industry like drivers, pilot, baker, and other to to support the local residents and the tourists in that area. Induced employment refers to the people working in the position only peripherally related to the tourism and hospitality, but generated because of it. Like example is doctor, construction worker, engineer, nurses are those who are service the employees working directly in tourism related position. Balance of payments. Tourism and hospitality has a major influence on the country's balance of payments. Balance of payments is an accounting of flow of goods, service, and funds in and out of the countries during the given period. So, balance of payments is part of the accounting that shows the flow of money in and out in tourism and hospitality industry in the country. If a country pays or agrees to pay more money than it receives, it has a deficit in its balance of payment. If it receives more money than it send or export, it has a surplus in its balance of payment. So, deficit and surplus are part of the accounting. Deficit is a loss or a liabilities in accountancy, and surplus is a income or earn of the company. So, balance of payment shows the income and less of the company. It shows it if the companies is generate income or losses. investment and development. Once the area has become economically successful, businessmen and government agency may be influenced to invest in tourism and hospitality in other industries in the area. It is known by economists as the accelerator concept. So one of the example of this is Margis. We all know that Margis is in the higher part of Esperanza. So the road is rocky and or mabato. So government agencies invest and develop the roadways or ang daan papunta sa Margis because Margis is one of the tourist spots in Esperanza.
Negative economic aspects of tourism and hospitality. While most countries encourage tourism and hospitality for its economic benefits, there are some negative economic aspects of tourism and hospitality that have to be identified and discussed. These are high inflation and land speculation destination, high leakages from economies of developing countries, low returns on investments because of seasonal fluctuations in demand, and overdependence on tourism and hospitality. Inflation and land values. The inflationary effects of tourism and hospitality can arise in different ways. Rich tourists can afford to, but at high prices. Retailers, realizing that their profit can be greatly increased by catering to tourists, increases their prices on certain products and provide more expensive goods and service. Such stores can compete more successfully with those catering to local residents. They can afford to pay higher rents and taxes, which are passed on to the customers through higher prices. Thus, local residents have to pay more for their goods. The relationship between tourism and inflation is more complex, temporal, and frequently local. A high inflow of tourists during a season may cause a rise in prices of many goods and services in the destination. Some authors suggest that it is undeniable that in tourist areas, the prices for products and services are in general higher than in regions where there is a very little or no tourism, and that in holiday destinations, the prices for tourist services are higher in the peak season than in the rest of the year. This upswing of prices is frequently greater in underdeveloped regions than in richer ones. The consequences of increases in prices may arise in different ways. Wealthy tourists will be able to purchase product at higher prices and when suppliers recognize that this increases their profits, they continue to raise the price further. Consequently, local residents are forced to pay more and may even have to travel further in order to get what they need, as local enterprises concentrate on a more limited range of products. On the other hand, mass or industrial tourism makes land and real estate prices higher as well. Development of tourism brings additional demand for land, and competition from potential buyers forces the price of land to rise. Locals are compelled to pay more for their homes. Inherently, there are losers and winners as a result of these price increases for land. Indeed, the losers are those local people who have fixed incomes, such as wages and salaries, while the winners are landowners and traders. In the long run, this may be a problem for visitors. If prices are to rise in a stable manner, the primary danger is the displacement of tourists to cheaper destinations due to due to the unbearably higher prices in the region. High leakages. Leakage occurs from a variety of sources. It occurs from the cost of goods and services that must be imported to satisfy the needs of tourists. Examples of these are developing countries which have to import cars, buses, manufactured materials, and technology from developed nations to meet the demands of tourists. So the term leakage has been mentioned for half a century in economics. It is defined as financial processes through which less money gets back into the economy and is considered as the monetary loss from a region or other hidden cost through tourism. This could be because the tourism businesses are owned by foreign companies and some of their earnings are transferred to the home countries, also known as export leakage. This type of leakage is not considered to be direct leakage, as the main source of money is tourist spending anyway. Therefore, the most significant leakage caused by tourism is import leakage, where tourists demand goods that the host country cannot produce and supply. According to some experts, import-related leakage for underdeveloped countries and small economies is on average between 40% and 50% of gross earnings, whereas the same figure for advanced and diversified economies is only between 10% and 20%. Seasonality. Many tourist regions experience low returns on investment because of seasonal fluctuations in demand. The seasonality of demand is reflected in hotel occupancy rates. Many hotels experience greatly reduced revenues during the off-season. So, seasonality causes fluctuation in tourist and visitor numbers to a destination. Therefore, some destinations at a certain times have more tourists and visitors than they are able to accommodate, while at other times, there are too few tourists and visitors to the region. The effects of seasonality are felt by the majority of hoteliers. Declining revenues, low occupancy rates, seasonal drops can disrupt the sustainability of an establishment if they are not anticipated by the hoteliers. If some decided to close their hotels to avoid losses, the marketing strategy should not be put aside. The hoteliers must take advantage of this period to confirm future reservations. An establishment that is already full before the start of the high season is one less source of stress for the owners. So seasonality is an important factor in the tourism industry. Economically, ecologically, and socially, it can have many negative influences on destination, but at the same time, it may provide a time for both the environment and the host communities to recover from the stress of peak season. Overdependence on tourism and hospitality. Some destinations have made themselves vulnerable to changes in tourist demand by becoming overdependent on tourism and hospitality for their livelihood. Tourism is highly susceptible to changes from within and outside the industry. Many destinations, even countries, may be highly dependent on tourism. Without tourism, most of the businesses would struggle as they are not places that local visits every day. When destinations become overdependent on tourism, they make themselves vulnerable to changes in tourist demand. Tourism is a susceptible industry and is heavily influenced by socio-economic and political changes, both domestic and international. For instance, areas with political unrest have lost out on tourists who prefer to travel to other related relatively stable destinations. In order to avoid economic disruption due to changes in demand, tourism destination should support the diversified tourist industry and basic economy. Therefore, over-reliance on the tourist industry carries some risk to tourism-dependent economies. For example, economic recession or downturn. The impacts of natural disasters such as tropical storms and changing tourist preferences may all have a harmful effect on tourism-dependent destinations. Similarly, the strategy of dependence on a single market or a few markets is also crucial. Changes in the economic condition or fashions in this limited number tourist markets, as well as changes in political conditions and travel links can have a significant effect in the destination economy.
Impact control measures. There are a number of ways to maximize the benefits of tourism and hospitality to the destination area. Edward Instinct, 1991, a consultant for the United Nations World Tourism Organization or UNWTO, has suggested the following. First, develop tourism and hospitality gradually so that local residents can have efficient time to adapt to it and understand it. It would also allow the government to proper plan, organize, and monitor tourism and hospitality. So, the importance of develop tourism gradually is order to the community to adjust and well informed about the development of tourism. Also, because of the better tourist planning and development, a host community gets to be the famous, especially from tourists, and can attract more tourists. Means that there boost to the economy of the place, and also it can generate more employment opportunity to the area. 2. Maintaining a scale of tourism and hospitality development that is appropriate for the local as well as the national environment. If possible, develop other economic sector so that there is a balance in the economy and employment structure. In some areas, small scales are dispersed from tourism are more suitable and concentrate mass tourism development. If possible, develop other economic sectors so that there is a balanced economy and employment structure in some areas. Small scales and dispersed form tourism are more suitable than concentrated mass tourism development as possible. We need to develop other economic sector for the balance of the economy. For example, is the country can develop more in agriculture industry, entertainment, communication industry to generate revenues income instead of focusing and depending on tourism industry. 3. Involves residents and their spokesmen in planning and decision making so that they have participate in determining the future of the sector. So, every residents in the destination area plays a huge or big part in terms of planning and decision making. From their opinions, reviews, and consents are all important for the betterment of the planning and its execution in the tourism. Fourth, apply the concept of tourism development zone. A tourism development zone is a chart of a land with defined boundaries, master plan to be developed into the integrated tourism complex, prescribed carrying capabilities to host tourism enterprises, facilities, and services within the property. Tourism development zone, it is an order to ensure that there are no lifestyle of the resident will be affected. The importance of it to know the carrying capacity of the tourism site and destination wherein comes to hosting tourism enterprises, facilities, and services. And lastly, it also to know the zone to sustain. Fifth, make certain that residents have easily access to tourism attraction, facilities, and services, including reduced admission fees if necessary. And that's important amenities feature that have public access are not prevented by tourism. We need to make sure that tourist destination is highly accessible and provide excellent service to the tourists can easily reach the destination and buy the tourism product and services offered. The more accessible the destination is, the higher chance of the tourists travel to them. That also means a lot more revenue and tourism income. 6. Provide incentives to local ownership, management, and operation of hotels and other tourism facilities and services so that residents can receive direct economic benefits. We can give or provide incentive to local businesses and services so that the local residents can benefit directly to economic. 7. Develop strong linkage between tourism and hospitality and other economic activities such as agriculture, fisheries, handicraft, and manufacture too. Help develop those sectors, reduce leakage in foreign exchange through the import substitution, and spread the economic benefits of tourism and hospitality. We need to develop a relationship between tourism and hospitality and other economic activities like agriculture, fisheries, handicraft to help them develop those sectors and spread the economic benefit of tourism and hospitality to economic activities. 8. Plan, develop, and organize tourism and hospitality so that no area becomes too congested with tourists and the resident can easily use community facilities and services. So in creating or developing tourism and hospitality, it should be not congested with tourists so residents can easily or freely move in their community and use their facilities and services in that area. 9. Train local people to work efficiently in all levels of tourism and hospitality, including managerial and technical positions, in order to reduce the number of imported employees and to lessen possible misunderstanding between tourism and local employees. We need to engage the people in the area to work in tourism and hospitality. And also, we can train them to introduce or assist the tourists so that it can lessen the misunderstanding between tourists and the employees. And also, it can reduce the imported of employees in that area.
Social impacts of tourism and hospitality. The social impacts of tourism and hospitality should not be confused with the popular term social tourism. The social impacts of tourism and hospitality refer to the changes in the quality of life of residents of tourist destinations. The objective of social tourism is to ensure that tourism is accessible to all people. Host-visitors interactions. Tourism and hospitality causes more interaction between the peoples, particularly between the tourists or visitors and the local residents or host. Smith categorized tourists into several types and outlined her views on the intensity of interaction between the tourists and the local residents. Her classification are as follows. Explorer. This type of visitor is interested in being an active participant observer among the population. The explorer easily adapts to local lifestyles and does not need special tourist accommodations. Elite. This type of tourist is few in number. He can afford to pay well for unusual vacations. He is well traveled and usually known as the jet setter. He differs from the explorer in his attitude. His arrangements are either made by travel agent or maybe pre-planned. Although he is willing to sample the local lifestyle, he requires some degree of comfort. Offbeat. This tourist adapts well to simple accommodations and services provided for the occasional guest. Unusual tourist. This tourist loves some exotic cultural sites. and the unusual or primitive sights as long as he can quickly and safely return to more familiar surroundings and group. Incipient mass tourist. This is a visitor who looks for the amenities of Western societies and hotels and other travel-related facilities. He is a mixture of both pleasure seeker and business traveler. Mass tourist. He comes from the middle class. He arrives in a destination with the other tourists. There is a diversity of taste among them and their attitudes is you get that you pay for. Charter tourist. The charter tourists come in mass with other of his kind creating an extremely high amount of business and receiving a high degree of standardization in services and products. The interaction between the visitors and the host is limited and impersonal. Table 1. Frequency and types of tourists and their adaptation to local norms. Types of tourists: explorer, elite, offbeat, unusual, incipient mass, charter. Number of tourists: very limited, rarely seen, uncommon but seen, occasional, steady flow, continuous influx, massive arrivals. Adaptation to local norms: adapts well, adapts slightly, seeks Western amenities, expect Western amenities, demand Western amenities.
Positive social effects of tourism and hospitality. It creates a new medium for social change and multicultural understanding. It encourages adaptation to the realities of modern life and works toward improving the host country's environment and lifestyle options. It promotes knowledge and use of foreign languages and improves health conditions and disease control. Social change and multicultural understanding. One of the most important benefits of tourism and hospitality is bringing together of diverse people to help them understand one another. Pope Pius touched on this aspect of tourism and hospitality when he spoke of subjecting oneself, joyfully or sorrowfully, to the inconveniences, great or small, which can with difficulty be avoided. The United Nations World Tourism Organization considers tourism as an encounter between a person and destination in its natural setting. Above all, the United Nations World Tourism Organization believes it is an exchange of encounter between individual groups of people as well as between social groups. Thus, it becomes an encounter between nations and an exchange of values. The impact of this exchange is significantly different between industrialized nation and developing agricultural nation. The more isolated country visited, the more significant the social changes are likely to be. Adaptation to the realities of modern life and improvements of the host country's lifestyle. Number 1. The quality of the lives improves in places where tourism and hospitality is being developed by bringing both urban infrastructure, water, housing, sewerage, and population benefits, medical care, social assistance schools together. Number 2, the changes that occur in occupation and income patterns create a middle class of different attitudes, values, and social concerns. Number 3, increased social mobility results in a new employment opportunities in tourism and hospitality, and changes in family relations occur through employment of women outside the home. This increases the family income and gives the workers' children opportunity for higher education. Thus, tourism and hospitality promotes progress and modernization through exposure to other attitudes and values. It brings about improvements in the lifestyle and quality of the residents of the host country. Use of foreign language. Use of foreign language brings people in contact with those of other language groups. The need and the desire to communicate increase interest in both the host and visitors to learn another language. Visitors to other destinations often want to learn a language to improve the quality of future experiences. They may rent tapes or buy books to assist them in learning a language. Many popular tourist destinations have developed short-term language courses to assist visitors.
So, the role of foreign languages in the delivering of quality service is significant in that they are an important tool to make a guest feel at home, hence draw more brand loyalty and larger cash flows, improve health conditions, and disease control. The desire of tourists for high-quality public health facilities can contribute to the maintenance of the improvements of those facilities and destination areas to provide sources of revenue which, in turn, can be invested in upgrading water sewage disposal facilities. Through tourism and hospitality, local residents can become aware of both health problems and good hygiene. This awareness can lead to a change in the health infrastructure of a destination. Improvement in one community then paves the way for improvement of the whole region.
Negative social effects of tourism and hospitality. While tourism and hospitality has enabled different people to strengthen the social structure, mass tourism has brought with it expenses and problems. So even if we say that our social structure is already strengthened, we cannot deny the fact that there are still problems that will arise and need to face. Same thought na pag mayroong positive effect, may mga negative effect din. Kasi no matter how well we construct things, may gusot pa rin na pagsisimulan ng problema na kailangan nating kaharapin. So among of this are social saturation, changes in the social structure, behavior and roles, community problems, and negative demonstrative effects. So, we will discuss each para malaman natin kung ano-ano nga ba ito. So, first, social saturation. The presence of large number of tourists in particular places at specific times result in saturation or congestion of facilities and service and competition for limited resources. The local residents frequently resent having to share their facilities and service with visitors. In destinations that attract a large number of tourists, public transportation is so crowded with tourists that there is hardly any room for local residents. Shops are full of travelers, forcing the locals to change their shopping patterns, and streets are full of visitors resorting to traffic jams. Thus, saturation or congestion brought about by tourism and hospitality is often cited as a social cost. In other words, large number of tourists causes troubles and headaches to the locals. By means na sometimes we need to prioritize them, like in transportation. It is a big deal, for example, during rush hours, knowing that the locals also try to work hard, and then by means na turista sila, there is a competition na sila ang magiging priority at hindi kayo. Therefore, social saturation means of competition of service and facilities for limited sources is a big trouble for the local peoples. Changes in the social structure, behavior, and roles. Tourism and hospitality changes the traditional forms of employment, which results in the lowering of the status of agricultural workers, migration of the population, and the breaking up of families. Many young people demand freedom from their families. They also disregard social norms such as respect for elders and close family ties. Young women who enter the workforce have changed their traditional dress to tourist clothes. So, tourism and hospitality in some area leads to the other social problems in the family. Like for example, when ikaw ay isang babae and you work in this industry, so if pinalad ka, some establishments in this industry have higher salary rates comparing to the situation na, like for example, your partner or husband is a farmer at ang kita niya ay hindi gaano maganda Or let's assume na mataas ang sahod mo kaysa sa kanya. So this often leads to the loss of self-confidence to the side of your partner or your husband. Knowing that ang mga tatay ay ang haligi ng tahanan, so therefore, dapat sila yung may kakayanan na buhayin ang pamilya in a great way at hindi ang kani-kanilang asawa. In addition, the improved way of dressing and grooming causes their partner or husband to be jealous and suspicious. So, why is it happened? It's because we know that in this industry, we need always to be presentable at all cost. So, di maiiwasan na may selos na magaganap, and if walang tiwala ang partner mo sa'yo, this has lead to a higher divorce rate na magiging sanhi ng pagkawasak ng pamilya mo. So this disruption is the kinship system reduces cohesiveness in the whole community, thus changing the population characteristics. Community problems. Prostitution, often called the oldest profession, certainly existed before the growth of mass tourism. It is difficult to say how responsible tourism and hospitality has been for the rise of prostitution in tourist destinations. Also, the increase in visitors is an increase of criminal activity, wherein wealthy tourists are the main targets. So since may mga taong mapagsamantala and by means that they need money, therefore, pumapasok sila sa mga ganitong bagay like prostitutions at pagnanakaw. So, why do you think tourism and hospitality are responsible to this? It's because ang mga taong mapagsamantala ay ang mga tourist at ang punteriya. Knowing, nandoon ang mga main target which are the tourist. At pwede silang maglamas, pasok in that place. And that would be considered as community problems. Negative demonstrative effects. Negative demonstrative effects consist of tourist behavior which can be considered socially and economically inappropriate. One of the major results of negative demonstrative effect is the polarization of the host from the tourist, which happens in a number of ways. So, ang negative demonstrative effect daw ay yung mga pag-uugali ng mga turista wherein hindi maganda economically and socially. Kumbaga, hindi sila marunong makibagay. So, there are negative results that could happen in different ways. First, tourists often demand commodities and facilities beyond the economic capacity of local residents. Rich tourists frequently eat in fine restaurants and live in luxurious hotels in areas characterized by hunger, unemployment, and limited economic opportunity. This disparity has led, in some cases, to militant revolutionary action by the local residents. So, this is simply describing of being demanding na wala sa lugar. In terms like, we expect something na marangya kasi we used to be it, but in the society na napuntahan natin ay hindi capable of that commodities. Therefore, it's a silent term na minsan nakaka-insulto sa mga locals to the point na nami-misunderstood nila. And then, ito ang pinagmumulan ng away between locals and the tourists. Second, the social norms of tourists that are very different from local customs give rise to social problems. Also, the values and materialism of young travelers are copied by the young local people. Examples are nude bathing, inappropriate manner of dressing, and irresponsible behavior. This one naman refers to the diversity ng culture which is sometimes comes as bad effect. Dahil kung sa kultura ng mga turista, ang mga bagay na ito ay okay sa kanila, and they practice that behavior sa place na pinuntahan nila, wherein it was observed by the young locals na, pwede palang ganito, ganyan. And they adopt that kind of culture and practices, wherein that kind of culture is not acceptable to the culture we have. So therefore, it is a bad effects, bad influence sa kung anong kultura meron tayo. So some examples of this are nude bathing, inappropriate manner of dressing, and irresponsible behavior. A third factor which initiates polarization is the importation of foreign workers from more developed countries. These workers, who are more skilled than the local people, generally get better paying jobs and are usually supervisors of less skilled local people. These foreign workers also compete more favorably for goods and services than the locals. Thus, the locals begin to resent the foreigners. The opposite is true in the case of some of the developed countries where less skilled immigrants take lower paying jobs, thus forming a lower social and economic group. This association sometimes creates social problems since the immigrants are not aware of the norms and standards of the host country. And this one refers to the social economic gap wherein may set of barriers sa skills and sa paying type from less skilled workers to import foreign workers, wherein locals are not aware of that at nagkakasamaan na lang ng loob kasi hindi patas ang pagtrato. Aside from that, there are changes in the consumption patterns in some tourist areas. In some places, the importation of foreign foods has little impact on their life, while others, a considerable change has occurred. The people almost abandon their local foods in favor of imported foods such as fast food from Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's, Burger Kings, Wendy's, and many other more.
Impact control measures. A number of control measures can be adopted to decrease the negative changes in the area. Some of those are: first, reducing the contact between host and guests by limiting the carrying capacity of destination and regulating the tourism flow. Second, separating the host and the tourists within tourist enclaves. Third, designing communities, education, and citizens involved program centered on tourism and hospitality development, policy, and regulatory issue. And fourth, expanding human resources development trainings program in all components of tourism and hospitality system including social skills or the interpersonal relationship and networking referral tactics.
Impacts of tourism and hospitality on culture. Tourism and hospitality increases the acculturation process as well as the cultural convergence of people. So acculturation is defined as those changes that occur in culture through borrowing from other culture. It is the process of change that occurs when an individual comes into contact with another culture. It is important to understand international workers' acculturation process in order to provide them with tools necessary to succeed. It is also important to create responsible practices that translate into positive migration outcomes for both domestic and foreign populations. Cultural convergence is the tendency of world cultures to become more alike. A very good example of this is the adaptation of many European ways by people of less developed countries because of the exposure to European culture and technology. The urban areas of the world are becoming more and more alike. Modernization and change from an agricultural society to an industrialized one bring about changes in people's attitudes, beliefs, and way of life. Part of these changes occur through contact with tourists. Tourism and hospitality is a vital force in acculturation since it causes more interaction between people. People who change the least are the isolated ones, those who live in regions of extreme environmental conditions, such as deserts, jungles, and polar regions. So, culture and tourism have a mutually beneficial relationship which can strengthen the attractiveness and competitiveness of region and countries. Culture is increasingly an important element of the tourism product, which also creates distinctiveness in a crowded global marketplace. At the same time, tourism provides an important means of enhancing culture and creating income, which can support and strengthen cultural heritage, cultural production, and creativity. Creating a strong relationship between tourism and culture can therefore help destinations to become more attractive and competitive as locations to live, visit, work, and invest in. It is clear that tourism and culture have become increasingly close linked as their role in regional attractiveness and competitiveness has become clearer. Culture in all its form is likely to feature strongly in the tourism product and promotion of most regions, even those which have traditionally relied on their natural asset, such as sun and beach or mountains, for their attractiveness. Destinations are also trying to increase their comparative advantage by adding to their stock of cultural attractions. They are trying to develop their intangible culture and creativity, cultural events, and gastronomy. Increasingly, destinations are also developing competitive advantage in culture and tourism through new forms of organism and marketing. For example, local communities are beginning to come together to develop cultural products for tourism rather than competing directly with one another. New policies are likely to feature new structure and projects involving public-private partnership and bringing together a wide range of stakeholders to utilize culture not just to make destination attraction for visitors, but also to promote regions as destination to live, work, and invest in. So, these are the two most important positive effects of tourism and hospitality on culture. These are the promotion of intercultural communication and the renaissance of native culture. So, intercultural communication. Mobility, which is a prerequisite of tourism and hospitality, is necessary for different social groups, nationalities, and cultures to meet and interact. Such interaction may contribute to the removal of social or national prejudices and the promotion of better understanding and positive social change. So, in intercultural communication, the quality of communication is related to the level of cultural involved and to the degree of improvement of the means of which is done. Intercultural communication experiences help tourists to know and to appreciate other cultures, but also help them to be a better understanding of their own culture. Cross-cultural communications between tourists and their hosts may promote changes in local culture while preserving or revitalizing local ethnic and cultural identity. The quality of cross-cultural communication is of prime importance if it is contribute to the promotion of understanding between tourists and their hosts. Understanding that behavior is not the only thing employees have to modify. They might have to set up new rules to be sure tourists won't have issues while they're enjoying a company's hospitality. Renaissance of native culture. Traditional art forms have been revived in several countries. Tourism and hospitality has stimulated the preservation of traditional art, including the traditional songs and dances. So, the renaissance of native culture is a way to preserve and emphasize the culture uniqueness of a particular location. The establishment of model culture village living museums has contributed largely to the renaissance of native traditions and crafts. Model culture villages create historical and ethnic environments designed to perpetuate tradition and stimulate awareness of the local area. So the model culture village is a development of a village in the form of integration between attractions, accommodation, and supporting facilities presented in the community life structure. So Model Culture Village is a rural area that offers a whole atmosphere that reflects the authenticity of the countryside, both in terms of social culture, customs, daily life, traditional architecture, village spatial structure, and has the potential to be developed various components of tourism, for example, attractions, food and beverage, souvenir, lodging, and other tourist needs. The Model Culture Village is a form of integration between attraction, accommodation, and facilities presented in a community life structure that blends with the, with the prevailing rules and traditions. So, there is two main purposes for cultural model village. First is to provide a location where visitors may observe and participate in a particular culture without disrupting the everyday life of the people who live in the area. Second is to portray the past history of the area. An example of a cultural model village is the Polynesian Cultural Center in Hawaii, which was designed to keep the traditional art forms and practices alive, giving the visitors a chance to view some limited historical aspects of life as it was once.
Negative cultural impact of tourism and hospitality. While tourism and hospitality has enabled different people to restore and maintain interest in their own cultures, it has also led to the destruction of a country's work of art. The local residents resent tourists who think they have the right to the country's art, whether bought or stolen. Several tourists persuade the natives to sell traditional objects which have been used for generations. The greed for money which induces people to part with family heirlooms explain the destruction of the archaeological sites or the desecration of monuments in Egypt, Bali, India, or Central America. Moreover, the increasing demand for artifacts has led to changes in its form and function as art objects. The artifacts may no longer be represented as traditional arts due to the following reasons. First, mass production due to increase in demand result to losing the careful and precise product workmanship. Second, the impersonal nature of the tourist market has decreased the spiritual relevance of the artist's work. Third, art is produced according to the taste of tourists, which in Africa means carving, animals, grotesqueness, and gigantism. And fourth, the increased demand has led to misrepresentation of age and authenticity of the object, resulting in a large number of imitations. Even model cultural village may be encouraging the loss of culture. Tourists who want to keep up with their schedules, as well as entertainment, require shorter and therefore less authentic activities. Thus, the entertainment loses its cultural value. Cultural villages and large hotels giving floor shows may manipulate authentic host traditions and events to comfort the time schedules and taste the tourist. This effort to turn folklore, religious or secular ceremonies, and artistic productions to material advantage leads to commercialism, thus prostituting the value of the local residents. The architectural design of most international hotels are of Western styles and often exhibit little knowledge and appreciation of the social tradition of the local inhabitants. Impact control measures. The following control measures may be adopted to reduce the negative impact of tourism and hospitality on culture. First, develop programs which enhance tourism and hospitality's contribution to intercultural communication and interaction, such as matching tourist types with destination characteristics and designing programs for the interaction of local residents and guests, promoting goodwill ambassador tourist education. And second, incorporate local indigenous features within Western-style structures, such as decorating hotel interiors with local paintings, murals, and sculpture, and encouraging porters, maids, and waiters to dress in native costumes. Environmental impact of tourism and hospitality.
Environmental impact of tourism and hospitality. The history of tourism and hospitality closely shows that the environment has contributed to the birth and progress of tourism and hospitality. The term environment connotes both human and physical characteristics. A term that describes the human and physical characteristics of an area is a pre-existing forms. It is expected that some change and pre-existing forms will be necessary to accommodate mass tourism. The environmental benefits and negative impacts of tourism and hospitality need to be recognized. So, the positive and negative aspect of tourism and hospitality indicates a need to encourage wise resources management. Positive environmental impact of tourism and hospitality. Tourism and hospitality has created environmental awareness in two ways. 1. Contact with scenic areas has raised man's awareness of the Earth's beauty and made it easier for him to see and enjoy minimum damage. And environmental awareness has been heightened by mass tourism, which cause direct and indirect destruction. In developed countries, several nation parks and monuments have been created to preserve the natural, cultural, and recreational resources of the land for the enjoyment, appreciation, and education of present and future generations. The development of park was intended to open up areas for viewing as well as to control the flow of traffic within the park. Tourism and hospitality has provided reasons for the preservation of historical buildings and the creation of museums. Tourism and hospitality has created appreciation of the environment by bringing scenic attractions to the attention of the public. Conservation. Conservation and prevention of the environment not only benefit the local area but they also determine the future of tourism and hospitality. First, the local residents benefit from the preservation. Second, tourism and hospitality, for as long as it draws tourists, will continue to be a social, economic, and cultural asset. Development of attraction. Several countries around the world are identifying areas which have the potential to attract tourists. High mountain areas have been developed. Historic preservation. Many historical sites in both urban and rural areas have been preserved to attract tourists. Example, Intramuros on World City in the Philippines, Jamestown and Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia, USA, Mount Saint Michael in France, and the Plymouth Plantation in Massachusetts, USA. This restoration and rejuvenation process is occurring throughout the world and serve as major characteristic of area intended to impress tourists. Resident benefits. Tourism and hospitality benefits the local residents in a number of ways. The first benefit is that the result of conservation and preservation can be enjoyed by the local community as well as by the tourist. The creation of national parks and the monuments provides quick access to the variety of nature's wonders and outdoors activities to both local residents and visitors. Another benefit which results from the tourism and hospitality development can be seen in coastal areas. The development of a coastal resort allows free access to the tourists and local residents.
Negative environmental impacts of tourism and hospitality. Exceeding the carrying capacity and saturation level of an area will negatively affect that area. The term carrying capacity is the degree of development a certain area can take without having detrimental effects on the environment. If the tourist development becomes saturated, The very attraction which draw visitors to a place may be destroyed, causing the decline in quality and popularity of a certain tourist destination. So, what does it mean? It means that if the place is in the state wherein it is not safe, like for example, we go to a tourist destination and their main highlight is their fish pond. However, the way going there is not good. Hindi nalinisan or may mga holes na pwede mong ikapahamak. Therefore, if the carrying capacity and saturation level of an area is not stable and safe, so that will affect the highlight of your place. Kasi sino pa nga ba ang pupunta doon if they don't assure their safetyness? Next, the saturation level and the types of environment between developed and developing countries are different. Some environments with significant differences in their saturation levels are wilderness. It may refer sa mga halaman o species ng hayop na matatagpuan lamang sa wild. Rural, which is not town or cities, but often called as farming or agricultural areas. Coastal areas o mga dalampasigan. Mountains o bundok, urban, and the developed versus the developing areas. The difference between developed and developing areas lies in the cultural dissimilarities and the measure of control used to handle the development. In developing countries, there is lack of control measures because of cultural differences, lack of technical skills, and lack of financial resources needed to implement plans. Environmental conflicts. Some of the problems affecting the quality of the environment are destruction of vegetation, pollution, and the destruction of wildlife. The destruction of vegetation occurs because of the large number of tourists who trample on the vegetation. In many parks, campers cut branches of trees and completely cut down small trees. In areas such as oceans and islands, many visitors going to and from the area destroy the vegetation cover, thus changing the natural habitats for birds and animals, and in some cases even changing the temperature of the area. Sometimes, the loss of vegetation leads to soil erosion and the further debasement of the environment. So, some of the common problem in environmental conflict ay ang pagsira ng mga halaman, pollution, at pagkasira ng wildlife. So why do you think our industry is responsible to this? It's because of large number of tourists na hindi lang basta nagbabakasyon, kundi naninira pa ng paligid. Like for some camping sites, tourists tend to cut branches of trees. Why they cut branches of trees? In order to create bonfire. Sa mga dagat, they eat. And what we do after? They litter. Sa mga natural habitats ng mga animals. Dahil sa curiosity sometimes, titignan nila, bubusisain nila, and what comes after? Nasisira na ang natural habitat at nawawala ng tahanan ang mga animals na walang kamuwang-muwang. And sometimes, because of the things we create, unti-unti nang nasisira ang environment. So, here are some types of pollution. First is the air pollution. Results from the gas fumes emitted by automobiles, taxis, buses, aircrafts, and factories. Areas with large number of vehicles usually suffer from air pollution. Understandable naman na, di ba? Pero additional to air pollution ay kasama na rin ang paninigarilyo, pagsunog ng plastics, vape, at marami pang iba. Next is the water pollution. is the result of the discharge of untreated waste from resort or boats into seas, rivers, lakes, and springs. Mga basura o mga chemicals na tinatapon sa dagat, rivers, lakes, and springs, which is not good. Kasi ang dagat, ang rivers, ang lakes, or ang springs is supposed to be place to relax at hindi basurahan. Na minsan, dahil sa mga basura natin, nasisira na ang mga natural habitats ng mga isda. And sometimes, ang mga basura ay napagkakamalan ng pagkain that results na maraming isda ang namamatay. Next is the noise pollution. It is associated with traffic congestions on land and on air. Many recreational vehicles such as motorcycles, motorboats, and aircraft cause a lot of noise. So, it is considered as pollution kasi hindi lahat ng nilikha ng tao ay maganda, or in other words, hindi lahat ay nagugustuhan ito. Like for example, ngayon meron tayong klase. And then, merong uncertain noise from vehicles o anumang bagay na nakakasaba sa pakikinig natin during classes. So, it is considered as pollution kasi nakakasagabal siya at hindi siya maganda. Next, we'll proceed to the residents' conflict. A number of conflicts frequently occur between residents and tourists or tourism developers. In cities, hotels are built at the expense of residential accommodations. The increasing value of land often forces residents to move away from the area. Hotel development also brings traffic congestions and air pollution. In fishing and hunting areas, the increasing demand creates problems for local fishermen and hunters who now compete with the tourists as well as with each other. It's not a good effect para sa mga local residents, considering that, yes, even if the place is developed para maging attraction, but during the process of developing the places, napiperwisyo ang mga residente. So, one of the common example dito na nangyayari dito sa atin ay ang mga road widening. Na may conflict between tourist developer or tourism developer at ang mga residente. Kasi ikaw ba naman, okay lang ba sa'yo na sirain na lang basta-basta ang pinaghirapan mo? But since para ito sa ikakaganda at ikakaginhawa ng mga daan, they will push you through at sila pa rin ang mananaig. Conflict between tourists and the local residents may also arise because of damage of the area brought about by littering, vandalism, and traffic congestion. In rural areas, the damage to crops, farm buildings, and livestock are the common complaints of farmers, together with the increasing value of lands, competition for labor, and land erosion. So usually, these conflicts between residents and tourists happen minsan sa mga katuwaan lang ng mga turista. Hindi lang because of littering, vandalism, and traffic congestions, or pagkasira ng mga crops. But sometimes, it's because of our attitudes. That sometimes, we tend to joke. At sabi natin, joke lang naman. We think it's okay for the locals. But sometimes, nami-misinterpret na ito ng mga locals. Naakala natin okay lang sa kanila. But even if it is okay sa kanila, there are times na napupuno din sila. At minsan, napagsasabihan wherein minsan nami-misinterpret ng isang side at ito ang pinagmumula ng away. Therefore, we need to be careful not only in our acts, but also in our words. Next is the geological conflicts. Tourism and hospitality affects the geological formations. Some tourists collect minerals, rocks, fossils, and corals from tourist attractions. Others destroy natural formation
by vandalizing. So minsan kasi, we are not contented of what we see or what we experience sa travel natin. May mga tao kasing gusto ng remembrance, especially yung mga taong mahihilig sa bato, mahihilig sa corals, mga plantito at plantita, na minsan umaabot na sa punto na nasisira na yung formation na ginawa in the place because we just want to get remembrance. Meron din naman yung mga turistang walang magawa sa buhay. Tapos, instead na magbakasyon na lang, minsan, after vacation, naninira pa ng mga bagay in the tourist destinations. So, it is a big issue because after that, it will cause trouble at kailangan ayusin muli para puntahan at maging spot ng mga next tourist.
Impact control measures. Two measures which will reduce the negative impact of tourism and hospitality have been identified, thus creating a quality environment for both residents and tourists. First, the general protective measures, and second, regulation and control of tourist development. The protective measures are designed to safeguard the various aspects of the environment: endangered animals and plants, beaches and forests, and through the creation of national parks and wilderness areas. The man-made environment included in the conservation and restoration of historical and archaeological monuments, valuable buildings, and neighborhoods. These measures have two objectives: to protect the environment and to maintain its attractiveness as a tourist destination. Regulation and control refers to zoning and land use and planning specifications on the facilities being built as to height, appearance, open space, and overall design, among other things. These are rapidly done in some countries like Switzerland, which builders must follow certain architectural styles before permission is given for the development. These are done to prevent an attractive tourist development. So, these impact measures ay ang mga bagay na pwede nating i-observe, pwede nating kunan ng idea, pwede nating gawin in order to lessen the problems and improve the place so that hindi ito maging unattractive. But more or less, ito ay mas maging more attractive. So, that's all for today. I hope you learned something from our report. Thank you and maraming salamat po.